Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. So I'm scrolling through YouTube and up on my feed pops a video from the Ramsey team titled, I have $12 million and she has $50,000. The topic? Prenups. If you've followed the Ramsey team for a while, you generally know their view on prenups is they want you to avoid them. Their belief is rooted in the idea that it's not yours, it's not mine. Once you become married, it is ours, and we're building a life together. However, there is a caveat to that. If there is now a large disparity in assets, like in this case, the Ramsey team's view does tend to shift in favor of a prenup simply because of the what ifs that could happen. So that's why I want to do this video, because prenups really aren't just about dollars. They're about fairness, protection, family, and trust. And I think this call brought up a lot of those questions, and we can highlight some of the most important things that we want to consider if you're talking about a prenup. Now, one of my favorite voices when it comes to marriage and money and divorce is a man named James Sexton. He's a top-tier divorce attorney, incredibly compassionate, incredibly smart, and if you haven't seen his interviews on YouTube, you are absolutely missing out. I have logged more hours listening to this man than I'd like to admit. He is that good. And unsurprisingly, he's pretty pro prenup. One of my favorite quotes from him on the subject is this: "Everyone has a prenup. It's either one you write or one the state writes for you." And I completely agree. If you're wondering where I stand on prenups, I think it is wise. I think it is responsible. And honestly, I think it's one of the most loving things you can do. I think there's this narrative around prenups that they are cold and unromantic, but honestly, I don't believe that. Sexton puts it perfectly when he asks, do you really want the government to decide how your relationship ends if it comes to that? And then he jokes, I've never walked into a DMV and thought these people are killing it. They should be in charge of everything, which, fair point. But really, the idea behind a prenup is simple. When two people are in love, when they are about to commit to each other, that is the time to have this conversation. If something ever happened, how would I want to protect you? How would I want to protect myself? What can we do now in good faith to take care of each other, even in a worst case scenario? Because the truth is, relationships don't always work out. That is not a moral failure, that is a reality. And I think one of the most loving things you can do is to plan for that possibility when things are good. So with that said, let's walk through some of my favorite key moments from this video.
So I recently got engaged. My fiance and I are both 36 years old. We're looking to start a Brady Bunch. We've got 5 kids between 10 and 12 between us. So the reason I'm calling is because we have a pretty large difference in assets. So I have roughly $12 million and she has roughly $50,000. And so we started the process of looking into a prenup, and it's been an emotional one. And I totally understand why. But then when we got the first draft back from my lawyer, that's when she's really not been feeling good about it.
So right off the bat, we're hearing a major difference in assets and a complicated situation with a blended family. He has $12 million in assets and she has about $50,000. I think truly in this situation, it's unwise to enter into a marriage without a prenup. So I'm so glad they're having this conversation, and it sounds like they're being really thoughtful. But here's where things get real. Even if both people agree to a prenup up front, once that first draft hits the table, sometimes it hits a little different. In this case, we hear that she's uncomfortable, and honestly, that's really understandable. These documents full of legal terms and hypotheticals can really trigger fear and insecurities, maybe a feeling of being less than. This is not someone being dramatic, it's the fact that money really touches on a lot of emotional subjects. I've been in this situation myself. Even before my marriage, I was very open that I wanted a prenup, and at the time, my boyfriend agreed. Then when he became my fiance and a prenup hit the table, it brought up some really complicated emotions. So this doesn't mean there's anything wrong, it just means that we're human. I think what matters most is how you handle these emotions. I think you have to make space for the discomfort. Let your partner talk about how it feels, because a prenup isn't just about protection. It is also about compassion and clarity and communication. You aren't preparing for failure, you're saying, if the worst ever happens, I love you so much that I want both of us to walk away with dignity.
Our plan is that she would stop working, she'd be able to be home with all these kids.
Okay, so this is absolutely something worth pausing on. He's saying that once they're married, she's going to step away from the workforce and become a full-time caregiver, caring for the kids. That's potentially hers as well as his. And this is a big ask. Even if this is something she wants, it's a big ask. When someone leaves the workforce, they lose an income, they lose retirement contributions, they lose networking opportunities, they lose all of it. So my strong feeling here is that this sacrifice needs to be acknowledged and protected within the prenup itself. If the relationship doesn't work out, she shouldn't walk away from the relationship with nothing after years of caregiving. And this is really one of the areas where a prenup can reflect a true partnership. It's not just financial boundaries, it's also about fairness and respect.
So everything we enter into the marriage with is separate property. She has a small amount of debt. She's been awesome about eliminating debt, especially the situation she came from. I don't want her to carry it all. We would just pay it off. And then the only other additional part is we're planning to get a house, and I was just going to buy the house. We title it in both of our names. I just consider it community property.
To me, this really says a lot about his mindset, and it's really refreshing to hear. He's not using the prenup to put up walls and divide it into yours and mine. He's talking about paying off her debts and then buying a home and titling it in both of their names, treating it really as community property. That is a joint mentality. That's someone saying, I want to build a life with you, not just protect myself from you. And marriage really is about merging lives. It's not staying in separate lanes forever. But it doesn't mean that you ignore practical boundaries. It means that you have the spirit of partnership in mind. And I really do feel like this clip demonstrates that he gets that. He's not being controlling or rigid. He's being thoughtful and intentional. And if you're going to navigate a prenup with your partner, I feel like this is the kind of energy you want to bring to the table.
Is there a way that this can be more progressive? Maybe over time and over years, some of the restrictions fall off to where it's like the longer we're together and the more that this feels right, some of this starts to fall off and now we start to become one. And after a while, it's all gone and we are one. Is there anything built in like that?
So there's nothing currently built in like that. So other than that, it's pretty basic. So everything we enter into the marriage with is separate property.
Does that include interest on the 12 million, like as that grows, or does any growth on that 12 million remain yours?
Yeah, so at least as it's currently structured, the growth in that would remain mine. I think we have talked about, it's not in the document, but like if I were to stop working to also help with the kids, which would be an option, the income that we drew from that would be considered our income.
I think I would. I'd be wondering about that if I were entering in that marriage. Like, how can we protect what you've already created, but how can I be a player and how that grows from here on out? Like, how can I be a part of that? I think I might be wondering about that.
This is where things get kind of interesting and really a little bit complicated. This caller is calling from California, and California is a community property state, and that has huge implications. Here's what that means in plain English. If you don't have a prenup in California, then by default, the state decides how assets are handled, and here's what that looks like. Everything you and your spouse earn or build during the course of the marriage is considered community property. So that means if the relationship ends, it's split 50-50. That includes income, business profits. It can include investment growth, equity in a home. Anything bought or received after the marriage is presumed to be shared. And any debts, doesn't matter who incurred them, it's presumed to be shared. Now, the assets he brought into the marriage, like his $12 million or any sort of inheritance he receives, that's considered separate property, but only if it's kept completely separate. That means no depositing it into a joint account, no using it for shared expenses, no putting it towards a home that you co-title. Otherwise, that money can be what's called transmuted, which means legally turned into community property. Here's where things get serious and why it matters so much for this couple. If he starts using any portion of this $12 million for joint expenses without a prenup, it could lose its protection as separate property. We're talking about things like buying a home and putting her name on the deed, paying for family expenses, a vacation or household items, purchasing shared vehicles, depositing the money into a joint account, or funding joint investments or businesses. These actions can trigger a legal shift for what was once considered separate property to be looked at as community property. And there is a distinction situation here. For instance, if he uses, say, $500,000 of this $12 million balance to buy a home for $500,000 and they jointly title it in both of their names, likely in that situation, it would only be this $500,000 home that is at risk, not the entire $12 million. However, regularly using this account for funding ongoing shared living expenses can create a clear legal impression that the entire account was intended to be shared. At that point, the full amount could be at risk of being treated as marital property. And once that line's been blurred, it's pretty hard to unblur it. Even if you can trace the source of all the funds, courts tend to weigh intent pretty heavily. So at the end of the day, actions speak louder than account balances. And that is why a prenup is so valuable. It lets you and your partner decide how things are going to be split rather than defaulting to whatever the law says. A well-written prenup can allow you to specify that $12 million and any interest it earns remains his separate property. It can define exactly how income, housing, and debts are handled. You can add in a thoughtful provision like a sunset clause where the prenup expires after a certain number of years, or vesting terms where more becomes shared over time. These are all options. There is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to a prenup. You can tailor it to your relationship and you can make it as generous and collaborative as you want to make it. Now back to one of the original questions from the clip regarding the interest on the $12 million. Should this be marital property or should it be his separate property? My personal opinion is that this is wealth that was earned prior to the marriage, so he has every right to say that in the event that the relationship ends, it should be kept as separate property. But this is up for this couple to decide. But without a prenup, the growth on this money, if it's used in any sort of way that is used jointly or commingled, it could be up for grabs. This is where every couple needs to sit down and ask, what do we want to build together? What do we think is fair? What do we want to protect? Because when you're in love and building a life together, what better time to talk about how you would handle it if things didn't go exactly according to plan? Because right now, you're probably the happiest you're ever going to be.
It comes into it's mine if something happens. But up until that point, it's ours. But for some reason, if something ever happened in a divorce, this part still goes back to me. Because it can be hers, right? Like you guys can share in this. It's the only time it's not hers is if you guys legally go through a divorce.
This is honestly how I really view a prenup. It's really about protecting what both of you bring to the relationship. But once you're in a partnership, it's all about building a life together, using whatever resources you have to build that life together. And hopefully nothing ever happens. But if it does, your prenup is a roadmap so both of you can walk away with clarity and dignity, not just confusion and heartbreak. With all of that being said, that's not to say that every prenup out there is fair. There are absolutely prenups out there that kind of come across as a bit predatory. But what if you went into it with love and honesty and integrity? In that situation, I don't think a prenup is a wall between two people. I think it's a way to say, I care about you too much to ever let this get ugly. Let's assume for a moment that this marriage goes exactly according to plan. No divorce, no legal battles, just a rich shared life. They raise their kids, they love each other deeply, and they grow old together side by side. You might think, well, if they never divorce, did the prenup even matter? Well, it does play a massive role in shaping the estate plan. Why? Because when one partner passes, especially in a blended family, the prenup can dictate what happens to everything you've built. And with $12 million on the table, likely much more over time as it compounds, those decisions really matter. Questions this couple will eventually face that are all shaped by the prenup. Does his estate pass directly to his biological children? Does he establish a trust that allows his wife to live off the income or remain in the marital home, but ensures that the principal goes back to his children after she passes? Does he leave anything to his wife's children, even if he's helped raise them for decades? What happens if his wife outlives him by 10, 20, or 30 years? Is she still protected? Are his intentions clearly documented? Or are his heirs left to fight it out in court? All of these questions are heavily influenced by the prenup, especially in states like California, where community laws and elective share rights can override unclear estate plans. A prenup doesn't just guard against a breakup. It can also bring clarity to how assets may be divided after death, especially when There are children from prior relationships. One partner brings significantly more wealth into the marriage. One partner steps back from income earning to support the household. You're trying to balance love and fairness and long-term legacy. A well-crafted prenup can support a smart and compassionate estate plan. One, it protects separate property and inheritance goals. This individual can ensure that his $12 million and its growth gets passed on exactly as he intends for it to, rather than the state. Without a prenup, a surviving spouse could claim a portion of the estate by default. Without a prenup, that right can be waived and replaced with one that he specifically chooses. For instance, his wife may be given life estate in their shared home. His wife may be cared for through lifetime income from a trust that he set up for her, and the principal of his wealth can be passed on however he chooses. None of this is cold, it's clarity, and it prevents heartache and confusion later. At the end of the day, everything, a prenup, a will, a trust, they all need to work together. If a prenup says one thing and then the trust says something completely different, this can create legal risk. For this couple, the goal should be to ensure that his wife is cared for, that his biological children inherit exactly what he intends for them to inherit, and that her children's role is thoughtfully defined. And that kind of consideration avoids litigation, preserves family harmony, and ensures that everyone is respected. When you blend families, you also blend expectations, obligations, and emotions. Does he view his wife's children as his own? Does he think that all the children should inherit an equal share of his estate? Or does he think that a disproportionate share should go to his own biological children? There are no right or wrong answers, but you do want to decide on these things intentionally. The prenup can give him a framework to make and document these decisions with love and clarity. Also, a good prenup and a good estate plan together mean a lower chance of court battles, fewer contested wills, less emotional chaos for grieving family members, and more certainty for everyone involved. There are multiple estate planning provisions that are often addressed within a prenup. This often goes well beyond simply assets and property itself. It can go on to define relationships, and you want to make sure that this is a document that truly fits within your life. This caller is truly doing something wise. He's not just protecting his wealth, but he's preparing for a full life. And if this marriage goes beautifully, and I truly hope it does, the prenup can still go on to play a major role in shaping what happens to everything they build. Not because of distrust, but a desire for clarity. A good prenup combined with a good estate plan should say this: I want to build this life with you, and I want to make sure that if something ever happens to me, you're taken care of, and my children are too, and there's peace, not confusion. So what are your thoughts on prenups? Leave them in the comment down below, whether you love them, hate them, or are completely indifferent. I want to know what your views are. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. Whoop. Here we go. Get the microphone pointing towards me rather than over there. I think they're amazing. Oh, we're not going to say amazing. No. Speak louder than account balances. Balances. Did you hear it? I'm not saying that. Balance. In the event that the situation, what the heck? A very bad or angry state. Maybe I shouldn't say it in a bad state. Maybe that's imposing a thought process that wouldn't necessarily be accurate.